DP-203 exam questions are newly updated, which can help you pass the data engineering on Microsoft Azure exam easily. 1. You have an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool named Pool 1. You need to perform a monthly audit of SQL statements that affect sensitive data. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you include in the solution? A. Microsoft Defender for SQL. B. Dynamic data masking. C. Sensitivity labels. D. Workload management. 2. You are designing an Azure Data Lake Storage solution that will transform raw JSON files for use in an analytical workload. You need to recommend a format for the transformed files. The solution must meet the following requirements. Contain information about the data types of each column in the files. Support querying a subset of columns in the files. Support read-heavy analytical workloads. Minimize the file size. What should you recommend? A. JSON. B. CSV. C. Apache Avro. D. Apache Parquet. 3. You need to integrate the on-premises data sources and Azure Synapse Analytics. The solution must meet the data integration requirements. Which type of integration runtime should you use? A. Azure-SSIS integration runtime. B. Self-hosted integration runtime. C. Azure integration runtime. 4. You have an Azure Databricks workspace named Workspace. In the standard pricing tier, Workspace 1 contains an all-purpose cluster named Cluster. You need to reduce the time it takes for Cluster 1 to start and scale up. The solution must minimize costs. What should you do first? A. Upgrade Workspace to the premium pricing tier. B. Create a cluster policy in Workspace 1. C. Create a pool in Workspace 1. D. Configure a global init script for Workspace 1. 5. A company purchases IoT devices to monitor manufacturing machinery. The company uses an IoT appliance to communicate with the IoT devices. The company must be able to monitor the devices in real time. You need to design the solution. What should you recommend? A. Azure Stream Analytics Cloud Job using Azure PowerShell. B. Azure Analysis Services using Azure Portal. C. Azure Data Factory Instance using Azure Portal. D. Azure Analysis Services using Azure PowerShell. 6. You are designing a statistical analysis solution that will use custom proprietary Python functions on near real-time data from Azure Event Hubs. You need to recommend which Azure service to use to perform the statistical analysis. The solution must minimize latency. What should you recommend? A. Azure Stream Analytics. B. Azure SQL Database. C. Azure Databricks. D. Azure Synapse Analytics. 7. You are planning a solution to aggregate streaming data that originates in Apache Kafka and is output to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. The developers who will implement the stream processing solution use Java. Which service should you recommend using to process the streaming data? A. Azure Data Factory. B. Azure Stream Analytics. C. Azure Databricks. D. Azure Event Hubs. 8. You have an Azure Data Lake Storage account that has a virtual network service endpoint configured. You plan to use Azure Data Factory to extract data from the Data Lake Storage account. The data will then be loaded to a data warehouse in Azure Synapse Analytics by using PolyBase. Which authentication method should you use to access Data Lake Storage? A. Shared Access Key Authentication. B. Managed Identity Authentication. C. Account Key Authentication. D. Service Principal Authentication. 9. You have a partitioned table in an Azure Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pool. You need to design queries to maximize the benefits of partition elimination. What should you include in the Transact-SQL queries? A. Join. B. Where. C. Distinct. D. Group by. 10. You are designing a streaming data solution that will ingest variable volumes of data. You need to ensure that you can change the partition count after creation. Which service should you use to ingest the data? A. Azure Event Hubs Dedicated. B. Azure Stream Analytics. C. Azure Data Factory. D. Azure Synapse Analytics.